What has produced more poetic language and lyrical verse in songs and in movies than the idea that there's something going on underneath the surface of a person's life? How often do we try and use the words like heart and soul to describe what makes a person? I've compiled a few of these lyrics and songs. I showed you a few of them a moment ago. And here's a few. It's tearing up my heart when I'm with you. I feel it in my soul, heart and soul. I fell in love with you. Quit playing games with my heart. Let me show you the shape of my heart. The heart never lies. I'm a soul man. You'll be in my heart. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart. My heart will go on. Wait a second. Titanic. My bad. We talk about things like this. We search for it because all of us know intuitively there is more to us than our body. There's something to us underneath the surface that makes us who we are. And so when we experience something and we try and explain what it is, we use it in terms like talking about our heart or our soul. There's something underneath the surface that makes us who we are. So this morning, we're gonna do something very simple. We're continuing to read from the greatest commandment that Dave started us on a couple weeks ago, where Jesus tells us we should love the Lord with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And so for this morning, we're gonna focus simply on what it means to love the Lord with our heart and with our soul. What does it mean when the Bible uses that type of poetic language? I do wanna backtrack a little bit. We will read the passage in a second, but if you will remember, this story that we're reading happens in Mark chapter 12. So this is in the last week of Jesus' life. He knows he's about to die. And the main people that he's encountering in this week are his disciples, who've been following him everywhere, the Pharisees, who wanted to please God through what they did, the external markers of the law, the Sadducees, who found their meaning based on their status, them being important and having position, and then finally the scribes, who tried to find meaning through the intellect, understanding things with their mind. So Jesus is answering questions from these people, and one of the scribes asked Jesus, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus answered this way. Jesus answered, the foremost is, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. So this morning we're gonna focus on the first two things Jesus says. We should love the Lord with all of our heart and our soul. Dave did a great job of talking about love in the last sermon and what it means to talk about loving the Lord with our heart. But what I want to focus on today is that specific idea that there's something about us beneath the surface that I want to describe today as the inner man or the inner woman. What is going on underneath the surface, and how do we love God with that part of us, with our heart, with our soul? So let's talk about this. We're going to survey parts of the Bible that use the words heart and soul, and we'll talk about a few things. The first one is this, the inner life, what's going on beneath the surface of who you are. It includes moral responsibility and intentions, the things that you intend with your heart and the decisions that you make. In Genesis chapter 6, this is when God decides to flood the earth with Noah. And before that, it says this, the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Now that's a phrase that we usually wouldn't use when we talk about the heart, the thoughts of his heart. Usually we think about our thoughts being simply a mental exercise or an exercise of the mind, but the Bible seems to say that there is a type of thought or intent of the heart that goes along with your will, what makes you decide to do things. In Proverbs 16, there's a fairly famous proverb, and your translation might say, the mind of a man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. The Hebrew word that gets used there is the word for heart. The heart of a man plans his way. So what does that mean? Certainly, we make plans with our mind, but there are people that I'm assuming you've encountered in your life, and maybe you've seen yourself do this before, where you can tell that their planning, their scheming, their directing of their life is not simply based on a rational exercise, it's based on what the heart wants. Maybe you've heard someone say this before, someone does something that you think is destructive, they make a pattern of decisions, and they pre-calculate what they're doing, and you say, why would you do that? And they say something like this, the heart wants what it wants. I'm going to get what I want. That's what it's talking about. The way you direct your life and your intent and your will, that is part of what it means that when we're saying our heart. So the question that should bring up then is with your intentions, with the things you desire to do, with the things that you elect to do and the decisions you make, are you loving the Lord with those decisions? Are you making those decisions out of what the Lord would want from you, or are you doing what most of us do, where you make your moral decisions simply based on what is convenient to you, what is going to feel good to you, what is going to make you look good in front of other people? That is our natural sin tendency. And Jesus says that with your heart, that part of you that intends to do things and then executes on moral decisions, you need to love the Lord with that part of you. Hard test for all of us, but Jesus says that's what we should do. The heart also, the inner life, also includes our emotional responses. I'm gonna talk about this a little more at length in a moment, but we live in a time of history where we often talk about our emotions simply as a biological phenomena. Like, my hormones are going crazy right now. I'm hangry, and so I'm gonna do something bad. The brain synapses in my brain are not working, and it's making me think weird. But the Bible talks about our emotional responses actually having a spiritual heart component to them. They are not simply a biological reaction. And that means that your life is not just happening to you. You are responsible for your emotional decisions. In Exodus 4, this is the story where God tells Moses he's gonna go into Egypt and liberate the people. And by the way, if you ever wanna have a fun, quick read, go read Exodus chapters 3 and 4, where God calls Moses to go to the wilderness. It's where he's at the burning bush. And it's a funny conversation because you have the transcendent God of the universe, miraculously speaking in a fire to Moses, and Moses is just giving God excuse after excuse. God says, I'm gonna send you to these people. He's like, no, I can't do that. And he says, yes, you can. I'm gonna be with you. And he goes, no, I really can't. And he goes, you don't understand how powerful I am. Just go. And Moses says, yeah, but I don't talk good. And God goes, I invented the tongue. Just go. And it's a pretty funny conversation. But at the end of it, God tells Moses his brother's waiting for him, his brother Aaron. And this is what he says. Behold, he, Aaron, is coming out to meet you. And when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. He will respond with joy. He will be reunited with a family member. He will be so glad to see you. There's other passages where it talks about us being hurt in the heart. Psalm 34 says, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted. How many songs and movies have we heard use terms like this to explain some sort of deep pain? My heart is broken. We know that's not literal language. Your heart is not broken unless you have some sort of actual defect with your physical heart. But there are some things that we experience. The boy you like or the girl you like does not like you back when you're 16 years old. Devastating. The only way that you can explain what that feels like is heartbroken. Some of you might be sports fans and you watch your teams play and all they do is hurt you over and over and over and over and over again. I'm not talking about any specific Houston teams that might have played a couple of nights ago and are playing again tonight, and they just do nothing but hurt me. And by the way, my wife is not from the United States, and so she's not a sports fan in the same way that I am. And she, especially watching me watch the Rockets in the last 5 to 10 years, there was a time where she saw me really upset after one of the games. And she asked me a question, and sometimes you'll get a question from your spouse or a person you know that just cuts you to the deepest parts of who you are. And she said, Reagan, why do you do this to yourself? And I went, why do I do this to myself? I was thinking, all of a sudden I'm having an existential crisis about my fandom for being a Rockets fan. Anyway, what were we talking about? Okay, I remember. There are certain things that we experience that we can only describe as being brokenhearted. There is an emotional response in your life, and it can't be explained away with biology. There is a deeper part of you that responds to things with joy, with sorrow, with anticipation, with elation, with disappointment. Those things come because there is a part of you that is made in God's image. And we respond emotionally to things that is deeper than simply our body. It is actually a part of who we are. But here's the tricky part to that. You and I, in the same way that we are responsible for our moral choices, you are responsible for what you do with your emotional reactions to people. Now, there's probably a few of you here this morning that need to hear that. The way that you emotionally react to things is something that you are responsible for, what you do with your emotional reaction. So it leads to this question. Right now, are your emotional reactions to the people around you, if someone saw it, would they say that person is loving the Lord with their emotional responses? Or would they say that person is completely at the whim over whatever they feel at the moment? The next thing we see is that the inner life, your heart, it includes who you are when no one else can see you. Who you are when no one else is looking. You've maybe heard someone give this definition of what integrity is. Integrity is that a person or a thing is the same all the way through. So if you act the same when you're around a group of people as you do when you're alone, or you act the same with one group of people as with another, that means you have some integrity in your life. And so your heart, part of what it means when we're talking about your heart is, it's who you are when no one else is looking. The truth, though, is that someone else is looking. There is someone who can see what's going on under the surface of your life when no one else can, and that's God. He knows what you are, what you dwell on, what you think about, what you stew over, what you hope for. He knows all those things. And so who you are in those moments matters. It matters. Are you loving the Lord with who you are when no one is looking? In 1 Samuel 16, this is the passage where Samuel's told that Saul is going to be rejected as the king of Israel. God tells him to go to this guy's house, Jesse. He says one of his sons is going to be the king. They line up all the sons, or so they think, in front of Samuel, and God tells him it's none of those people. And here's what this passage says. God sees not as man sees, for man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. What's under the surface, the character, the moral decision-making, the emotional responses. God sees what no one else can. That means that is true for you and is true for me. God sees who you are when no one else is looking. So the question that asks is, who you are when no one else is looking, are you loving the Lord with that part of you? When you are alone, are you spending time with the Lord? Are you directing your thoughts toward him? Are you directing your intentions toward him? Now, the answer to that question is that none of us are, right? All of us are deficient in who we are when no one else is looking. There are parts of us that we don't want anyone else to see. We can, if we're in Christ though, come to the Lord and ask him to clean our heart. David does this exact thing in Psalm 51. He says, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Now, David is not asking God to literally clear out the arteries of his heart. I wish it worked that way. I've tried, or maybe I will try. But what he's saying is, with my spiritual life under the surface, make me pure. Create in me a clean heart. We can go to the Lord and ask for that. Jesus in Matthew chapter 5 says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So we see in the biblical language, this word, heart, both in Hebrew and in Greek, what it is getting at is who we are under the surface. Your thoughts, your intentions, your emotions, the way you respond to things, what you desire to do, how you decide to make moral decisions. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about the heart. Now, there's an even deeper level to the inner man, though, and this was what we would describe as the word soul. I do want to say this before we actually start reading it. When Jesus says we love the Lord with our heart, soul, mind, strength, I don't think that Jesus' intention with this answer was to say that you are made up of these four parts, heart, soul, mind, strength. These are the discrete parts of who you are, and each part you need to love the Lord. I think Jesus is trying to give us this language to say, with all of who you are, you love the Lord. So we don't need to try and parse out too much what's the difference between the heart and the soul, other than to say that the Bible does use the word soul at specific moments, and it seems to be describing what the deepest layer of who you are is. What it is that makes you made in God's image. And here's the way I want to talk about this. The inner life, or the soul, proves that we are more than material. More than material. In Genesis chapter 2, this is in the creation account. God creates the heavens and the earth, the planets, the stars, the land, the sea, everything. And finally, he makes a human. He makes man and woman in his image. Here's the way it's described in Genesis 2. Then the Lord God formed man of dust from the ground, so his body, and here's the key, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became our English translation says a living being. The word here used is he became a living soul. Living soul. Now, this is confusing because especially when we think of like Greek language, like Greek mythology, we think of the soul as this floating ether thing that's separate from your body, that's trapped inside your body. That's not the way the Bible talks about it. The soul encapsulates all of who we are, but it shows that you are more than your body. There's something deeper in you. And here's the reason this is important that we teach on this for a second. We live in a time in history where the default worldview of the secular West is a term called materialism. So I want to explain this to you. When I was a young person, I thought materialism meant like you care about buying things. It made me think of the movie Mean Girls, where they're like, get in the car, loser, we're going shopping. That's what I thought meant materialism. But materialism is actually a philosophical worldview. And so I want to read it to you. This is from the Encyclopedia Britannica. It says, the view that all facts, meaning everything that exists, including facts about the human mind and the will and the course of human history, are causally dependent upon physical processes or even reducible to them. So let's talk about this in layman's terms. Materialism says that the universe is just the material that makes it up. The atoms and molecules and things that are happening, everything that can be boiled down to a physical process. When you have a thought, all that's happening is that there's a synapses firing off in your brain. There's no more meaning behind the universe. It's just physical stuff. Now, we know that's not true. We know intuitively it's not true. It's the reason we use this metaphorical language to explain what happens to us. When you have a thought, you are not just having a physical thing happen in your body. It's not an accident. You are intending and willing something to happen. When you feel emotional pain, you're not just feeling hormones going through your body. You are actually experiencing a real thing because you are a whole person, more than just the meat that makes you up. Part of the weakness of the materialist worldview is that it simply assumes we are just meat puppets floating through the universe for no reason. But we know that's not true. Every relationship that you have in your life has meaning. The thoughts in your mind, in your heart, they have meaning. The desires you have for your future, they mean something. So what are we gonna do with it is the question. So that deepest layer that makes you human, makes you more than an animal, makes you something unique, that is what we're talking about when we say the soul. So the inner life and the soul includes our deepest desires. So I mentioned a moment ago, I was talking about the heart making moral decisions, deciding to do things when you want something in your life and you're going after it. There is a deeper level of desire, and the way I would describe this, fancy word, we're talking about like your existential needs, the most formative things to your existence, the deepest things of who you are. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about the soul. The soul is meant to connect with God, and so at your deepest level, those needs are included in what we're talking about in the inner life. In Psalm 42, the psalmist says this: "As the deer desires or pants for the water brooks, so my soul pants for you, O God." So he says the same way that an animal, when they are thirsty, desires water, they know their body is designed for water. He's saying, I know that my soul is designed for you at the deepest levels. And so, when you get a person who tries to fill the deepest needs of their life with shallow things, the result is they're thirsty all the time. They don't experience satisfaction because they're looking in the wrong places. And so the psalmist is saying, God, my soul needs to be connected with you. That's true for you and for me as well. Our actual soul, the deepest part of who you are, what do you need? Jesus says, man does not live on bread alone, but every word that comes from the mouth of God, you need to be connected to him. Psalm 63 says this: God, you are my God, and I shall seek you earnestly. My soul thirsts for you, my flesh yearns for you. In a dry and weary land, there is no water. Thus I have seen you in the sanctuary to see your power and your glory. He says, God, I need you in the way that I need water, in a deeper way, and so he seeks it in worship. If any of you, I don't know how you guys are wired, I am not wired to connect with God in worship music in the same way that some of you are. There are some of you who connect with God at the deepest levels of your life when you are worshiping through song with other believers. And when that happens, what's happening is that your soul is connecting with the God of the universe. Some of you need to connect with the Lord by being out in nature or having your mind engaged in his word. We do those things because we know we are made at the deepest levels of who we are to connect with God. The next thing we see here too is that the inner life, the soul, belongs to the Lord. In Matthew 10, Jesus says it this way: don't fear those who kill the body but are unable to kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both the soul and the body in hell. Jesus says if you're simply attending to the needs of your shallower parts of who you are, your base desires, it will not lead you to satisfaction. And in fact, it will lead you to destruction. Matthew 16, Jesus says, whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his, key word, soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? Jesus is saying you can have the shallower layers of your life met, like you could have those needs or desires met, and it doesn't reach what you actually need. Think of it this way. Imagine a person who has dreams as a child to become something. Maybe they want to become an actor or a successful business person or a singer or an athlete, whatever it is. They achieve that dream. They achieve their top level dream that they want, maybe even some of those deeper levels of being noticed by other people and accepted and adulated and loved by people. But still, under the surface, and as they go through it, they lose their soul in the process. They give up on their moral decision making. They do things that they wish that they hadn't done. We see that play out over and over again in human history. We see it so much that I can guarantee you, you've probably seen some form of media before or a show where a person in the show, quote unquote, sells their soul to the devil. Now, by the way, I don't think that's a thing that happens very often. I don't know if the devil's in the business of making contracts. I don't know. I can't tell you if he is or isn't. But I can tell you that metaphor plays itself out in people's lives. They give up their deepest desires to meet the more base desires, and in the process, that deepest part of them, their soul, is damaged. They become lost because of what they're doing. And that thing can happen to you and I as well. So, where does this leave us? There is an inner life that all of us are responsible for. Your heart, your soul, your decisions, the things you dwell on, the parts of you that are supposed to connect with God, the part of you that holds everything together. How do we love God with every part of that inner life? The answer is a hard one because you can't. You and I are not capable of fully loving God with all of our thoughts. You can try this. Jesus raises the bar in Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7 when he says, you've heard it said, don't steal, or you've heard it said, don't kill, but if you're angry with your brother, then you've committed murder. You've heard it say, don't commit adultery, but if you've lusted after a woman, you have committed adultery in your mind, in your heart. Jesus is highlighting for all of us that if you watch your inner life closely, you cannot avoid, at this point, where we are on this side of heaven, you cannot avoid that sin nature creeping back in. So how do you love God with every part of yourself in that way? And I think there's one word that answers that question, but I'm not gonna tell you yet because I wanna tell you a story first. There was a guy, lived a little over 100 years ago. His name was Judson W. Van Deventer. What a name. But he was a young guy and he had aspirations, desires for his future. He wanted to be an artist. And he started to feel, though, a call into ministry and was struggling with what he wanted to do. Should I be an artist? Should I go into ministry? What should I do? And talking about this experience, this is what Judson said. He said, for some time, I had struggled between developing my talents in the field of art and going into full-time evangelistic work. At last, the pivotal hour of my life came, and I, keyword here, surrendered all. A new day was ushered into my life. I became an evangelist and discovered down deep in my soul a talent hitherto unknown to me. God had hidden a song in my heart, and touching a tender chord, he caused me to sing. So Judson said he was struggling. He didn't know what he wanted to do until he decided to surrender his desires to the Lord. And here's what he said happened. He uses this beautiful poetic language. He says, I discovered a talent in my soul that I did not know that I had, and God touched a tender chord and caused me to sing. Beautiful poetic language, except he was not using just poetic language here. The gift that Judson was talking about that God gave him was a literal song. A song that came from Judson's life. He wrote it, the Lord gave it to him. And it's a song that, by the way, this was in 1898 that this happened. It's a song we are still singing in church today. It's a song called I Surrender All. Here are the lyrics to the song. He says, all to Jesus I surrender. All to him I freely give. I will ever love and trust him. In his presence daily live. Judson, in this song, writes that if I surrender my life to be in the presence of the Lord every day, then God will do something different with my life. I will let go of my desires for what I want and the things that I have dreamed because I trust the Lord that what he has is better. When he did that, God gave Judson a song that is impacting people a century afterward. How incredible would it be if God gave you something in your life that made such a dent in the world that believers all over the world in different languages in different countries could be singing a song that God placed in your heart? Now, some of you, I heard you singing during worship, and I don't know if I want to hear your song. The point here, though, is that when you let go of your own desires and your own thoughts, there's so often that we just white knuckle in our life the things that we want. God, I deserve this, I want this, I desire this, give it to me. When we learn to let that go and trust that what God has is better than what we have, he can do things with your life that are beyond your comprehension. He can do things with you that you don't think you're capable of because you're not. He is capable of doing things through your weakness that are unfathomable to you and to I. We have to learn, though, that loving God with our heart and with our soul means surrendering to him. God, whatever you want me to think about, I'm going to think about. Whatever you want me to decide to do, I'm going to do. Wherever you want me to go, I will go. Whoever you want me to influence, I will go around that person and influence them because, God, I trust you. If you surrender those things to God, he will change your life. And there might be some of you here that are struggling with that. You have these desires that you think are from God, and maybe they are, but you're holding on to them so tightly that you're not letting God work in your life. My advice to you would be pretty simple. If you want to honor the Lord with your life, let go of your own desires for yourself. God will give you everything that you need and more. Jesus says, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and then all these things, everything else you need will be added to you. Trust the Lord, let go, surrender. He will change you. And that means loving the Lord and trusting him with every thought, every desire, everything that you do and say, every interaction you have with people. The question is, do you trust him enough to release it, to let it go? If you do, he will change your life.